Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Exciting news, this episode is sponsored by Jewish Big Brothers and Big Sisters of LA. Check it out.
So when I hear that people are interested in signing up to be a big, I just want to go give them a hug and tell them it's the best choice you'll ever make. It's the best way to make an impact and to be with someone and trust the process. Know that Jewish Big Brothers, Big Sisters puts it together in a way that it makes an impact for everybody. And that connection for me is everything.
If I had to choose one word of what it was like to have a big, it would be awesome.
Just do it. Sign up for it. Everything that you're going to do is going to be more than you can imagine.
If you want to make an impact on a child's life, Big Brothers and Big Sisters of LA is accepting applications today. Go to jbbbsla.org. That is jbbbsla.org. It's another episode of Bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing. Yes, that's right. I said there's no such thing as a bad Jew. And with me today is Dan Elbaum from the Jewish Agency for Israel. Dan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Great to be here.
Amazing. It's great to have you here on the show. So listen, we have a sensitive topic that we're going to be discussing today about the Jewish connection to Israel. Only reason why it's sensitive, it shouldn't be a sensitive subject, but it is. And the only reason why it's sensitive is because of all the craziness happening in the geopolitical climate of Israel and its war against, it's like 7-front war against the Houthis, against Hamas, against Hezbollah, insert a terrorist organization here. And it's like everyone's pointing a gun at us. But I think the biggest reason why this particular question has become relevant is because of the fact that the trolls that aren't even affiliated with these, some of them probably are affiliated with these terrorist organizations, but like, for the most part, the people that are just gaslit and the people that are just completely manipulated by this narrative are putting out this idea that Jews are not connected to the land of Israel. Before we actually get to that specific answer to that question, though, we have the right of entry into the podcast, properly introducing yourself in what we call our 4-minute Bad Jew challenge, where I'm going to time you for 4 minutes, and you got to tell me my story. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Usually it takes me 4 minutes to clear my throat, but I've been watching the show and I'm up for it.
Amazing. Thank you for supporting the show too. I really do appreciate that. Here we go. Hans, start your yellow.
So with apologies to Lou Gehrig, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And let me just tell you why. I was born with 2 grandparents who were Holocaust survivors, who were part of my life since I can remember, and really have been my anchor and my North Star in terms of how I've thought about Jewish issues. I was blessed with 2 parents, continue to be blessed with 2 parents who raised me with the notion of how important Israel was, Judaism was, and that the people they spoke about with admiration at our Shabbat dinner table were never those who had amassed personal wealth or had become famous. They were people who had really helped the community. I'm incredibly lucky out of my mind, had met my wife at 18 when she was 17, and I was smart enough to realize that she was the one. We've raised 2 beautiful daughters, Abby and Carly. Will be annoyed that I've mentioned their names, who are both share different passions of mine. Abby with fantasy football, Carly with Israel. I'll take it on both. I've got something to talk with both my daughters. Then maybe most relevant today, I have been blessed professionally that I've never had a day of work where it really felt like work. I spent my first 4 years as a felony prosecutor in Cook County, and then talk about luck. I had a boss come up to me quite randomly and say, "Elbaum, are you a Jew?" And that's often not a good question to be asked, but the reason he was asking is because a Jewish organization was hiring at the time. And that led to me working first at the Anti-Defamation League, after that, the American Jewish Committee, and then for the last 3 years at the Jewish Agency for Israel. And here it feels weird to say I'm lucky, because you think about the work of the Jewish Agency, and I hope we'll talk about it a little, but to be at the Jewish Agency right around the time when the war with Ukraine started, and then having the privilege of flying with Ukrainian Jews as they fled the country, and then months later to work with the Jewish Agency for Israel after October 7th, with so many Jews I know after October 7th, their question is, I don't know what to do. And at least I'd had that answer. I knew exactly what to do, that I was going to work to raise money for victims of terror. I was going to work to help Olim absorb into Israel. I was going to work to connect Jews to Israel at this vital time. So 50 years old, I'm not going to say I've been lucky in terms of my choice of sports teams, in terms of many other things, but with everything that's important, I really do consider myself truly and enormously blessed to be doing what I'm doing with the people I'm doing it with.
Wow. Well done. Loved all the gratitude expressed in your 4-minute Badger challenge. I love the idea of being the luckiest man in the world. That's really, really awesome. And your daughters seem like really great people. And this journey that you had in your career and how it's led for you to combine your passion with your career is very rare and really wonderful. So I really do love that.
It's a privilege. And I have to remind colleagues who work in the Jewish world, because there are hard days and there are frustrations. And you've got to feel that in your heart. And I'm sure you do too, in your own way, that there would be other things you could be doing where you wouldn't have these types of challenges. But because you believe in it, because it's part of who you are, because you don't turn it off at 5 p.m., that's what makes it, for me, that's what makes it all worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Every time I have a chance in my workday to have these conversations on the podcast, to leverage the podcast into my own personal learning experience, and then have that chance to also offer that same experience to other people, and potentially even work towards a future where this can become monetary, that's huge. I really do appreciate that. So speaking of monetary, I'm going to go ahead and put in a personal plug. If you want to support the show, not only can you leave comments in the episodes and the social media posts, not only you leave a review, but you can also be sure to go to badjew.co, where you can go buy merchandise from the podcast. Personally, my favorite outfit is the Mazel Tov t-shirt, Mazel Tov tank top. We got great workout outfits with a great Jewish theme in both modest and unmodest designs. And we also have a really wonderful Schmooze Cruise tumbler. We also have a really fun, some stickers, whatnot. It's a great way to keep the show alive and running. We really do appreciate those who have bought our merchandise so far. So thank you so much. Okay.
You have a just coupon or cheat code.
Stand on that. I'll get you wounded.
Don't you worry. And if I'm invited back, I'll wear my merch.
Yes.
We cover another topic. You got a deal.
I love it. Be sure to go to badjew.co. Okay, Dan, let's get to the actual episode here. Dan, as far as your work with the Jewish Agency for Israel, I mean, the question of the episode is very much associated with what you do. It's in the name of your organization, after all. Let's get into it, because right now, like I said before, there are a lot of trolls, and there's a really toxic narrative out there in the world about how Jews are actually not connected to the land of Israel. They don't even call it land of Israel. Let's debunk that case right now. How are Jews even connected to the land of Israel?
So look, for every one of us, we find our own connections, and I want to be very humble about that. That I feel like that for everyone Jewish, there's a different and unique way to find that connection to Israel. But just as a matter of history, as a matter of our DNA, as a matter of the people we are, it is impossible to tell the history of the Jewish people without talking about Israel. And I mean, I don't know how often I'll wind up quoting Benjamin Netanyahu, but like he said it very well. It's, why do you think they call us Jews? It's because we're from Judea. Like it is within every single aspect of who we are. And I'll tell you that I see some of these trolls you talked about on the internet, and for the most part, it's easy to roll your eyes, although to get frightened sometimes by how many likes you might see on an account or how many people seem to be absorbing that garbage. Where I do find it even harder and more troubling, and it's a great topic to dive into if you're interested, is when I see it from Jews or people who identify as Jews, and they talk about how they define their Judaism by some type of distance from Israel. That's something that strikes me as profoundly sad, profoundly missing the point. It's out of step with the overwhelming majority of the Jews. They make a disproportionate amount of noise, but it doesn't make it any less sad or any less of a challenge for us.
Pointing out the gaslit Jews that will go on their way to say that being a Jew and a Zionist are two different things, which, yeah, to some degree has some truth to it. It's not the ultimate answer, just because it's not wrong doesn't make it right. You see a lot of people in the comment section who justify passing on hateful slurs by saying, oh, actually, I'm one of these tokenized individuals that supports a group. It's like this idea that, So long as I can deny that I have a home somewhere in the world, I'm a good person. And that's a weird statement to say. It's like, how do we get to that point, you know?
I find some comfort in the notion that it's not unique in our history. The one sort of outlier, if you look at Jewish history, was the Holocaust, where it didn't matter if you denied your religion or Judaism. The Nazis didn't care and had a scientific basis. But every other travesty that our people have faced, there have been Jews who've tried to distance themselves from the community in some type of way to claim that they were the good Jew, whether it was conversion or today, whether it was claiming wokeness or whatever it is. So we tend to think of these things as new phenomena, and I don't discount them at all, but they're not new in that sense. And it's something that we've struggled with throughout our history, from the time of false messiahs and Inquisition on down. So they come from something of a tradition, a sad tradition within our people. And it does give me some comfort, I guess, that it's not a new thing. Just maybe a bit of a segue, but cut me off if I'm sort of rambling on too long. Like when I hear someone say, I'm not an anti-Semite, I am an anti-Zionist. And I just heard someone frame this very well the other day, and I'll put my own spin on it, mostly because I don't remember who framed it originally. Like, it might be like technically possible to be like I'm a logical guy, and I want to say that, yeah, you can probably find someone who is an anti-Zionist and also not anti-Semitic. But in that same way, I'd say you could probably find somebody who's a Holocaust denier and is not anti-Semitic. They just have a very odd and obscure belief in that, or I could find somebody who believes that blacks and whites should be separate but equal and is not a racist. In all three of those cases, there could be some type of logical argument you could twist out to make the case that those things are true. But if you look at the Venn diagram of who these people are, I think almost every anti-Zionist you're going to find is an anti-Semite. I think every Holocaust denier is going to be, almost everyone is going to be an anti-Semite. And I certainly believe anyone who believes that blacks and whites should be separate is a racist. So we're talking about this logical, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin type of argument, when the overwhelming reality is that almost every person fitting one definition fits the other one as well.
Well said. And, it reminds me of two expressions that I've heard. The first one, two Jews, three opinions. Well, okay, we typically use that for the fact that in our tradition, we have a rich tradition of debating and arguing with each other. But one could also say that expression also is a reflection of the fact that there are Jews in our midst that will disagree and say that we do not have a right to the land of Israel, which is bizarre. We do not have a right to our own home. Like, why are you doing that? Doesn't make sense. That's the first thing. The thing that reminds me of is something that I saw on TikTok. And again, I hate TikTok, and yet at the same time, it's where most of my followers come from. And that is that someone told this joke. It's got to be laugh. Ready for a real knee slapper? Here we go. Two Jews walk into a bar. One Jew is a Zionist, the other Jew is an anti-Zionist. And they both get killed because the bartender is an anti-Semite. So funny. So like many Jewish jokes, not particularly funny, but it carries a message that we understand that that nobody on October 7th was looking at anyone's political beliefs. They were looking for Jews. And right.
There's many Jews who don't recognize that. On the two Jews, three opinions, like, I love that. Like most of us would never change that about our people. I love that I can get into an argument with my brother and my cousins on every arcane type fact, and then we'll see things differently, and we should. I'll say that even before October 7th, but especially since October 7th, on certain questions regarding Israel, we have been as unanimous on this issue as any people have been on most any issue, in terms of Israel having the right to exist, in terms of supporting Israel against Hamas, and these other issues. There are people, there's any number of shades, there's any number of politics, but those who are saying that there's this huge anti-Zionist rift are deliberately misstating the numbers, or are misinterpreting likes on Twitter for actual data in any way, shape, or form. By the way, I like TikTok too. Both my daughters have blocked me to mention them again, so I was excuse for joining, but I'm enjoying the other stuff I see occasionally.
Okay, good. Question for you though: do we have the statistics on the number of anti-Zionist Jews out there?
So we have statistics in obviously it depends how you frame the question. I'll say every different area of statistics, when you ask the question in the way, does Israel have the right to exist, or does Israel have the right to exist as a Jewish state? The numbers are always overwhelming. Over 90% say yes in supporting that right. So at its very essence, and you can talk about the different meanings of Zionism, and to your point about two Jews, three opinions, everything else, there's a fairly, as supportive as any people are of any notion, and certainly we do have that type of support. We've seen that support swell even further since October 7th, where Jews have rallied there. And I think it's worth noting, I mean, we're doing this podcast, 11 almost a year to October 7th. I'm not sure exactly when it'll come out. Like, this is not a fresh enthusiasm or people a day afterwards. Like, Thomas Paine, 250 years ago, wrote about the summer patriot of the sun, and the person, who's, when it's easy to be patriotic. Like, it's not as easy to be pro-Israel today after everything that's gone on over here. Yet the numbers, despite those trends, despite the negative news coverage, despite what you see on social media, the majority of Jews, when asked about supporting Israel, the overwhelming majority of Jews continue to say they support Israel.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's it's important to have the statistics on this, just because, again, like, a troll's primary mission is to gaslight and to put out false narratives that make people think. I can't tell you how many comments I've done, by the way, where someone goes out of their way and says, "I'm a Jew, and yeah, I'm still saying this," and that's like a common. That's the whataboutisms, and then it's also, "I'm a Jew and I'm saying this, and so you aren't because you're a bad person." It's essentially what the whole message is broken down. And when that is being said, when that is being stated, I personally roll my eyes at it, because it's like okay, just because you commented that you're a Jew doesn't verify that you're a Jew. And there's people out there that will fall for that, even though to us it's obvious. To others, right, it's not. To those who are disconnected, it's the first time they're ever considering, oh, you mean I could be a Jew and actually not be on Israel's side in this conflict? So I can go on and on about the trolls of the internet, but I want to actually go back here.
Look, I would suggest that as a cheat sheet for listeners here, that when on social media or in personal contact or on TV, you hear or see somebody say, "as a Jew," and then deliver an anti-Israel message, take note of their name, maybe Google them, see if they've ever cited their religion for anything else other than criticizing Israel. And far be it for me to question somebody's Judaism. It's not the business I'm in. We all reach it in our own way, on our own level. But if your primary way of expressing your religion, your faith, is to criticize the one Jewish state that we happen to have, like, I think that says something about how you're approaching this issue. And I think it doesn't have to, look, you can listen and you can agree or disagree with what they say, but you should at least consider that within what they say. Like, with that, when I hear people talk about, I'm culturally Jewish, I'm really opposed to Israel, but it's very strong for me to be culturally Jewish. And then sort of you dig deeper into sort of what does that mean in terms of that? Like, to me, it's a pretty bad substitute that they like bagels and lox or really enjoy Seinfeld or Woody Allen. And by the way, guilty on all counts of those things. I'm all in for all those things. Maybe a little less Woody Allen, less my thing, but everything else, like on the culturally Jewish, totally get it. Like, it's not a thing to build a peoplehood about. And if it's, I see my Judaism because I'm a good person, like, and that's why I'm Jewish. Like, there's a lot of religions out there with a lot of good people. Like, I don't think we've ever claimed that the uniqueness of Judaism is that we're the only good people out there. Like it's pretty horrific statement about what you're saying about everyone else. Is somehow that you think that Judaism has some type of monopoly on goodness. To me, that's also equally alarming.
I think that's well said. I think you did touch up on something that I actually haven't fully articulated yet on this podcast. And that is that, every single episode I have, even in the descriptions on social media that I have, or what this Instagram or TikTok account's about, it has a very short explanation, right? I always open up by saying, this is bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing as a bad Jew, right? So I say that, and then, then I come across the anti-Zionist Jews, and I'm left puzzled. I'm left genuinely puzzled, and I'm left very conflicted because, and this is me focusing my idealism on something that I really care about, which is the longevity and the survival of the Jewish people. And it's important. It's important to have Israel for that reason. And yet have this kind of inframing where there are Jews out there. There are disconnected Jews for the most part. You also have, by the way, the fringe subgroups within the Orthodox Jewish world. I'm blanking on the crazy names, but you see the Orthodox. Yeah. And I'm very conflicted about them because there's the knee-jerk reaction where I do personally struggle with not calling them a bad Jew. And I'm so idealistic about the romanticized vision of the Jewish future that I don't want to call them a bad Jew. And other people, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends would automatically jump to calling them a bad Jew. And rightfully so, by the way. You know,
right.
I personally think the world would be a better place without their voice in the world. But here we are. And so because they're here, because I can't do anything, I have to figure out a way to balance that and figure out where they fit in my narrative and how that works. I'm left puzzled. So I think you did touch up on something very interesting there.
Thank you. No, look, I appreciate it. And I think when we talk about Jews who've been vocally not critical of Israel, criticism is completely fine. There are organizations that are highly critical of Israeli policy, but they were still with us on the Mall in Washington, rallying in support of Israel. So I could disagree with them, debate with them, but I don't think we're talking about those groups. When we're talking about groups, and I'll name some out, Jewish Voices for Peace, if not now, what made is part of their existence to really be there to oppose Israel and to really take common cause with Israel's enemies. In this case, what gives me some level of comfort, I suppose, is distinguishing between the leadership and the followers, that there are well-meaning people out there who just have something fundamentally wrong. Nobody, including leaders, is cannot be redeemed at some point. We believe in that of tshuva, of coming back and everything else like that. So for me, there's a slight scale perhaps, but there is a chance at redemption for those people, that they will eventually see what they're doing, how profoundly harmful it is. I wouldn't say that, they do exist. We can't deny their existence, and what they do, whether they perform acts of mitzvah, whether they light candles on Friday night and all these other things they might do, I suppose fits in the overall formulation of who they are. I will say what they allowed themselves to become, in terms of becoming beards for anti-Semites, of taking movements that are profoundly anti-Semitic and providing some level of Jewish cover for them, is among the most damaging thing that a Jew could do to their community. And even if I still, and I do still consider them Jews, I don't think they have a place right now under our tent in our communal discussions or otherwise. They've chosen their side in terms of how this works out. And this is somebody who works at an organization based on connecting Jews around the world. This is something profoundly painful for me to say, that I don't have time for them, that there's so many other people that I need to reach. Time is a finite resource, that for me, this is a problem for another day. This is not while the house is on fire to try to understand how they reached this point where they could stand against our community in this way. I'm not writing them off completely, but they are a problem for another day, not something that we have time for now. And that's how sadly I would encourage others to look at them.
Well said. Something I want to say again, I'm going to reference 3 podcasts that we've done that this reminded me of. First one is that, as far as them not having a place at the community, to have these conversations that they should be having at community, but a conversation right now, but the being a part of the conversation, if you will, because it's impossible to negotiate with them, right? Is the first thing is that when we did the Hanukkah episode with Jay, I did this Hanukkah episode with the guy who runs the Sephardic Soul, which is the Instagram account. Great guy. I love that guy. He brought up something that was really interesting, is that the Maccabees by today's standards were considered Jewish radicals, Sure. They essentially were. The Maccabees went and hunted the Jews that were heretics and followed in the ways of the enemy and the Greeks.
Yeah.
So that was the first one.
Tough stories to dive into, right? Once you get what I learned at Solomon Schechter, it's
yeah, exactly. The second thing I want to quote is, it was an episode I did when I was in Israel most recently with Joey Sway. Joey Sway is a current yeshiva student. He did a great episode about why we study Torah, and the topic about anti-Zionist Jews came up at the very end of the episode. And I asked him, what do we say about anti-Zionist Jews? And he said, I pray for them. And he quotes King David from Tehillim, from Psalms. And the quote goes something like this, which is that my enemies wanted to kill me, so I decided I wanted to pray for them. That wasn't an exact quote. That's not exactly how King David said it. But essentially, ever since that episode, I want everyone to know, even the anti-Zionist Jews who might be listening, that in my morning prayers, I pray for you to see the light. I pray for you to see the wisdom. I pray for you to come closer to God. And I pray for you to understand that without Israel, you are completely vulnerable. Even as an anti-Zionist Jew, even as someone who detests the land of Israel, you're allowed to disagree with the politics and the government and the corruption that might exist. You are absolutely right, okay? This is not a propaganda video by any stretch of the imagination, but you cannot only jump on the narrative that the only solution is to wipe out the entire nation, because you are connected to it. It's just undeniable. If it goes, you are just as vulnerable as the Jews were in the Holocaust. That's why it needs to exist. The Holocaust didn't happen. Sorry, Israel wasn't founded because of the Holocaust. It's more so that the Holocaust happened because there was no Israel. Never forget that. Please, please, please. If you're an anti-Zionist Jew listening to this, never forget that. So, Dan, I do want to go back. I do want to talk about a little bit some of the biblical ties here. You brought up Judea-Samaria, right? When did it become the land of Israel? Or when was it Judea-Samaria? Like, that's something that I think, and also like that land has had a lot of names, by the way. It was Judea-Samaria, it was Palestine, it was, right? And then later it became Israel. So all these name changes, when did these name changes happen, and why did they happen? For what reason?
See, I need more of a biblical scholar than me, I think, on some of this. So I'll give you my basic level understanding. And of course, but there have been Jews in Israel for thousands of years. The Jewish state, obviously, has been there since as we know the story of Exodus and the Jews going over there. In terms of Judea and Israel, my understanding or my vague memory from day school was the breakup of the kingdoms after King Solomon into two different Jewish countries, with Israel being named after Jacob, Israel in the north, and Judea in the south of the tribe of Judah. And then through these times, there's been different names, different conquerors, everything else. But what has unified us is a continual Jewish presence, even if a small one, throughout that time. And unlike every other people who were thrown out of their land, this continued yearning for return, like to the facing of East when we pray, the saying of next year in Jerusalem at our Passover Seders, this connection that we kept and enforced and refused to let go of, which to me is one of the most inspiring things about us, has been what's connected us. And I think about working at the Jewish Agency, and I referenced it a little bit in the beginning, that within a 3-month period, I was on 2 different flights. One was with Ukrainian Jews who were fleeing the war in Ukraine to go to Israel. And 3 months later, I was on a different flight with Ethiopian Jews who were flying to Israel to make Israel their home. Now, 2 different groups, you would not confuse them for each other. The Ukrainian Jews, by the way, it was like 90% women, just men aren't allowed to leave because of army service, but dressed in Western gear. Every one of them had a smartphone. Every one of them, I'd say, to a person, was crying and upset to be going to Israel. This was not a decision they thought life was going to take them. They had made their life in this other country. But here during this time of war, as a way of fleeing, they were going to the Jewish state. On the flight with Ethiopians, there's not a single person who wasn't singing and dancing the entire time. I've never heard Hatikva sang with such feeling to bring tears to my eyes as much as it did. Rejoicing, singing, cheering throughout the way, like a pep rally for the 3-hour flight as we flew there. And it occurred to me that Israel's there for both groups, right? Those who never thought they'd be in Israel, but needed it suddenly at this time, and those who have been praying for Zion and yearning for this return to Zion their entire lives. And we are so blessed and so unique that we have this privilege to live in this time through a quirk of faith that our grandparents, great-grandparents could never have dreamed of existing in. And that so many of us take it for granted. I mean, hopefully fewer since October 7th, where we questioned that. that to me is part of this connection of how do you not look at these two different groups? And it used to be when we talked about Israel, like I didn't talk about Israel as a refuge for Jews a couple of years ago because it felt like my grandfather's language. It felt like the language of the Shoah, of if only we had Israel, we could have gone there, and everything else. All true, by the way, but it's still true today. And in many ways, it's just as true today in terms of that. And that's something so beautiful that if you somehow decide you want nothing to do with it, you don't want to associate with it. Like I like to think I'm a forgiving guy and empathetic guy. I don't understand how you're approaching this issue if you consider yourself a Jew.
Well, I think it's amazing how this particular conflict has helped raise everyone's attention to understanding their level of loyalty and compassion towards the land. And it's interestingly enough, it's put into the forefront of the narrative of what it means to be a Jew in the diaspora, just how important Israel is. And again, like that loyalty, that connection, that constant yearning for a better Israel, even, right? Is, and people can think of better Israel in a lot of ways. People can think of better Israel from a political standpoint, talking about they want a better, higher functioning Knesset with more pure leaders. You can look at it that way. You can look at a better Israel as a nation of healing where there's no more wars happening. You can look at the nation, like a better Israel, as a nation that has a higher level of commerce, that not only is working internally, but also has exports as well. You know, if you constantly work and strive towards a better Israel, you are solidifying your identity as a Jew, and it has nothing to do with your religiosity, your level of observance. It just has to do with the acknowledgement. Yeah.
Just to take it one step further, I read something amazing in E-Jewish Philanthropy a week or so ago from Leonard Etloff, who's the director of the Kings Bay Y. And I told him I'm going to steal this. So now I'm stealing it, although at least I'm giving him credit this time. The future is, when I'm not on the record, it's going to be me. But he said that growing up, he fell in love with Israel. And he's realized that his children are going to fall in love with Israelis. And that's actually something like, look, I'm all in for the Ben Gurion story, for the 6-Day War, the Exodus. I stumble on Exodus being on, like I'm watching it for 2 hours. That's not my kids. My kids, you know, I gave credit only to one of them, but both of them love Israel. Like they love the Israelis they know. They love the connection they've made with younger Israelis around their age. Israeli music, the food, the scene, everything else like that. And that for us is why at Jewish Agency we spend so many sh'tzim, these young emissaries, to be a face of Israel, to connect with American kids, and to be there in their high schools and for JCC in their summer camps, all those different ways, because that is the real win. That's how we're going to win this through the connection, is because when you meet Israelis, when you get to know them, when you hear their music, when you learn about, they say they're more direct culture than us polite Ashkenazi, at least me as a very polite Ashkenazi Jew. There's so much to love and there's so much to resonate with you. It really is. That's our silver bullet. That's 100 times more powerful than talking about this is the land that gave us for many Jews. Of telling the stories of Ben Gurion, of the Exodus, of all those other things. My kids, it's not that they'll politely listen or roll their eyes if I'm telling that story, but if they get a chance to hang out with Roey, the Shinshin who lives down the street with our neighbors, who's a cool kid, he's got 2 earrings, like that's what they're hanging out with. Like he's the guy in terms of that. I'm pretty sure one of my daughters might have a crush on him too. I'm letting that go. Doesn't catch this, but beyond like this, that's how we're going to get this connection.
I really hope that from that they get married. If they get married, by the way, okay, you're gonna have to play this episode, the whole episode from the whole wedding, okay?
And we will all wear merch in the wedding party.
Let's go. Everyone will be drinking the Schmooze Cruise tumblers. It'll be great. Remind me of the Village for the show.
We might do it anyway, but definitely not.
Awesome. Dan, what is the best way for people to connect with you, to connect with the Jewish Agency, if they want to further this conversation, get involved, be more a part of it, start to get more further educational resources on this?
Definitely go to our website. I know you guys have been really nice at flashing it on the bottom, but if anyone is listening on the podcast, which is how I usually listen, jewishagency.org. Also, federations of North America are incredibly supportive of us. So usually if you're involved in your federation at all or want to get involved, usually there's a great way to connect with the Jewish agency through that too. So those are our primary vehicles. But also summer camps, BBYO, JCCs, we really are trying to touch on every aspect of not just American Jewish life everywhere. So we're all over the place. And finally, I'll put it out there for the world. My email address, dinel@jaffe.org. Email me. That's my job. I want to talk to people. I want to hear the message. And I want to understand where American Jews are. That's part of my job, is to convey that to my colleagues in Israel and to really be your voice for the Jewish agency.
Fantastic, Dan. Really appreciate you being here on the podcast. Thank you again for giving such educational resources. Everything that you mentioned, by the way, will be displayed in the show notes of this episode. And to the listeners, we'll see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Bad Jew.
Terrific. This has been a treat. I appreciate it.
Shalom.